Welcome back, everyone. I trust you've had really useful set of discussions in the breakout group. I'm going to be inviting people to feedback from the breakout groups that they've been in. Before I do, I'm going to ask Anne if you could kindly share the screen and show slide 14, because we've gone back live and wanted to sort of sum up where we'd got to prior to breaking out into the group. So this summit is all about our emergency response to the cost of living crisis, because what is clear from the analysis that we've commissioned here in Newham, the scale of the challenge facing our borough is going to be huge and catastrophic for so many families, including so many more families that have been incubated somewhat over previous years, and this is a period prior to COVID-19, of the impact of austerity. We have this as a character in our borough. We have a section of our community as a consequence of structural issues of inequality, disproportionality, poverty that have borne the brunt of austerity over the past 12 years or so. We also have a local economy that, in reflecting the decimation of secure jobs, is characterised by insecurity, heightened insecurity, and that's the reason why we have pivoted as a council since 2019 around inclusive economy and community wealth building, and there's a huge amount of work to be done. We've also been mobilising and working in partnership with our voluntary community and faith sectors in order to embed that required infrastructure so that all of us collectively are able to work collaboratively to help across these range of issues, and that very much accelerated during that COVID-19 period, but we're in a very, very different and challenging phase right now. And the insights generated from the research are very stark. It's the combination of those existing challenges that I described in work poverty, low disposable income, the insecurity that brings with it, high housing costs. You know, we're very much at the coalface of the housing crisis here in the capital, and increased prices for all those essentials, food, energy, create a perfect storm here in Newham. And the evidence also points to four main areas of mobilisation that we need to consider or we need to build on based on what we've already got in place: food, energy, housing quality, and housing tenure, that are driving and exacerbating this particular cost of living crisis emergency in Newham. And all of those issues have been discussed in breakout groups, and what I'm going to be asking now is we will come back and I'll invite people to just provide their contributions from what was discussed across the two principal questions that were asked. And if we can go to the next slide, just by way of recapping. So what more can your organisation do now to provide emergency support to residents? And what should we be lobbying government to do more of to help support Newham residents? And once we conclude from the feedback sessions, I'll be jumping onto some additional slides to just set out exactly what it is that we are doing presently. I'm going to be making some announcements about what more we will be doing as a council, and then what happens next following the conclusion of this summit. So if we can just remove the slide, go back to the main forum, and if I can open up to anyone who'd like to share from their breakout session. So I'm going to be looking at hands up, virtual hands up, that is. So does anyone want to come forward first? Right, Darren, I'm actually not going to go with council officers at the moment. Is there any voluntary community and faith sector? Otherwise, I am going to ask someone myself. I've seen Julia Bello. Would you be happy to provide some feedback from your breakout session? Annie Fuller, I can see your hand up.
Hi, yes, I'm in the public health team. Our group talked about the need for both short-term solutions and long-term solutions. So like an immediate action plan, and then what we can kind of do in the longer term. In terms of what some of the organisations are doing now, like Subco Trust are cooking meals for people on a daily basis, so 30 to 40 people. So they've set up like a community kitchen, and I know that's something that Andy Gold is looking at putting out more widely. We talked about as well another solution being co-locating organisations together, but needing a practical plan to do this. So enabling organisations to kind of network, know who to talk to, making the spaces known so that people can kind of get together, but then equally needing to overcome the issues like existing contracts that people are supposed to honour. So how do we kind of get through that? Do we want to just focus on question 1 at the moment? Yeah.
You just in fact, I'm going to pause you there. Yeah. Thanks for now, and then you can come back on the question 2. But if I can ask for anyone that contributes, just cover off across both questions. I'm going to be inviting Marla from Skills Enterprise to provide some feedback, and you may not necessarily need to be a facilitator.
Hi, thank you, Sana. In our group, we were discussing about voluntary sector organizations offering more number of services or increased number of hours of services so that we can have users spending more time in community centers rather than being in-house, so that they are switching off their heating and lighting. And also, we were discussing about that in our center, we were offering increased employment support for our users because demand for additional hours of work is more. So in that way, we were able to support, and also increasing number of benefit advice so that people don't miss out on the benefits and other grants opportunity that's available for them. And also to tackle digital exclusion, we are supplying free Wi-Fi to people who are struggling to pay for their Wi-Fi and connections as well. And we have increased more timings in terms of training users as well. And we have approached a lot of corporate organizations to donate laptops so that we can give to people who are unable to afford it as well. And so all these we are planning to do in the banner of warmer together, so that we can offer socialization support as well, and offer more of energy advice. So it's very collective thing that we have to do. And also voluntary sector organization apply to funding from other outside the council trust as well, so that we bring in more funding to the borough.
Right, thank you very much, Marla. Some really, really useful and interesting points, particularly around the accessibility of Wi-Fi. And in a short while, I'll be announcing some specific things that will align to some of what you said that we'll be doing as well as council, but really, really good contributions. I'm going to be inviting Susan Lucas, then Peter Lang to feedback, and Olivia before I go back to others. And apologies if I've missed anyone. Over to you.
I'd just like to comment on the second question. One of the things that I said is that Newham should be really proud of the work that you've done around inclusive economy, an economy premised on resources, not growth. And I think it's really important that you tell that story and partner with others who are doing that work to tell that story on a national level. I suspect that it's going to fall on deaf ears on a national government which is still premised on a neoliberal model, but actually bubbling up from the grassroots, you have got this idea that we need a very different economic narrative, and you need to start now.
Thank you very much, Susan. So I'll make sure that that's very much understood within the organisation in terms of features of what it is that we have been doing since 2018 as part of our language around the current cost of living crisis. And I've actually responded to one of your earlier comments on the chat where you talked about the widening of the household demographic that's going to be sucked into this crisis period right now. My point being that actually, if you think about the impact of austerity in Newham over the past 12 plus years, we've been in a crisis for a prolonged and pronounced period of time. And so this current cost of living crisis is actually a catastrophic emergency, and it will begin to suck in like a black hole more and more families that may have been cushioned in previous years. And that is going to be a challenge for all of us, because whilst we have come together and have mounted this really impressive and amazing response as a collective, demonstrating the impressive energy of this borough, we're going to be contending with a really different and challenging set of circumstances where we're dealing with families that had never dreamed of coming to a food bank, never dreamed of leaning into the council for help, never thought that they would have to ask where do they go to generate more income through either benefit maximisation and all of those things, and how do we do that in a way that is gentle and sensitive to issues of stigma, and where we need to mobilise our health partners around the emotional impact that that will have on people's sense of self and health and well-being. And I say that because of personal experience, knowing how devastated my mother was when we lost our family home when I was younger. The mental and emotional impact and sense of shame that she carried for so many years was really palpable, and she's still recovering from that. So thank you very much for that, Susan. Right, I'm gonna bring in Peter, then Olivia, then I'm gonna go to Zulfika.
Thanks, Roxana. So we spoke a little bit about things in terms of kind of hard-edged support for people. So, you know, things like income maximisation, supporting people around kind of food and, you know, crisis grants and those sorts of practical things that people will need increasingly. But we also spoke about the kind of the soft side of the help and the mental health impact that this is going to have on so many of our communities, and the importance of providing support for people's well-being. And I think there's also a perspective angle here that we need to look at in terms of generous leadership individually and collectively, understanding that the solution's not going to come from the other and them. I think some of the questions that we should be asking ourselves is, what can I do? Not necessarily what can our organisation do, what can our government do, what can our council do? I think we should be saying, what can I do? And I think there is an element of the fact that we need to be better. The circumstances are really, really difficult and challenging, and we can use this as an opportunity to improve and to kind of grow as a community. I think we learned loads of lessons through COVID, and I think that the strategic and the collaborative approach that we learned in COVID must be carried on here through this, and we need to build on that and grow on that. I think ultimately this is an opportunity for us to grow and develop. It's very difficult, but in adversity we can grow.
Yeah, absolutely. As iPhone to everyone has said, we are the East End community is what we do well, and we will bring back. Thank you very much for that, and apologies for name a new iPhone. Your profile doesn't describe your name. So
sorry, it's Alison. Sorry, Roxana, it's Alison.
Oh, thank you very much.
I should have changed it before. I didn't, and it won't let me do it while I'm on Zoom. So apologies there.
Thank you very much. Okay, Olivia.
Hi everyone. So yeah, thank you. I'm speaking from Compost London, and in our breakout room we covered quite a few things. Some of it very much targeted at residents and some at organisations. So for residents, it was sort of increasing the availability of discretionary funding. We had a Money A&E in our room that was explaining how many people and the influx of people that are needing additional support because of deficit sort of budgets within the household. We also had a few things spoken about around connecting organisations a bit more and providing opportunities for networking, relationship building. You know, I know there's work that's already happening with, you know, social prescribing software where people are going to be signposted better, but building those relationships alongside having something that is so public. Then there was some discussions around, you know, subsidising or increasing the availability of funding to help households convert or change over to renewable energy sources. And if there's any other programs sort of like that. But then from an organisational perspective, we talked about sort of an initiative around warm spaces, and Compost London looks after the voluntary and community sector, and we know that that's a sort of support for a lot of residents, and they are familiar spaces. So maybe seeing some of those that have buildings that are going to find it increasingly hard to manage financially for community sector organisations, to almost subsidise it and use it as warm spaces. And then also that might touch on the point that Anya brought up earlier around co-locating and the sharing of resources across the sector. We also discussed ideas around communications and how broad that needs to be, and it needs to cover almost outdoor, print and everything for everyone to know where to go. And from an organisational perspective, we talked about grants now covering things like core costs. Often grants or funding just covers project activity, and we know that there's going to be support for small to medium-sized businesses, but the voluntary sector sometimes feels a bit left out in the cold. And I think there are a need for a view of their core costs or their staffing costs to be included so that they can stay afloat and be able to support the residents that they serve. We looked at things around the high street and the vacant buildings that we do see, and whether there's an opportunity to bring some of those back into use. That I don't, you know, it could be a conversation with landlords or if it's other stakeholders, but it's also, you know, seeing it as a potential base for voluntary sector groups, but also warm spaces, places where residents can go, places that are familiar and local to people, and not leaving spaces that are kind of losing money for landlords, but using it for the benefit of the community that live around and nearby.
Thank you very much, Olivia. And just so that you know, as part of what I'll be announcing shortly, there will be features of what you said included in that, and around energy efficiency, alongside unlocking assets for access to communities. That's also something that's baked into our inclusive economy community wealth building agenda, and there's been quite a significant amount of work that the council's been doing around our own assets that aren't being optimised because of a whole set of reasons, and we've just finalised the unlocking our assets strategy, which you'll be seeing more of. I'm conscious of time. Councillor Zulfikar Ali, if you could kindly post your comments, if that's okay. I've just been to get the voices of colleagues from our voluntary sector. There's Peter who wanted to say something, but your hand symbol isn't working. So that's Peter Ekakora.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, you said it quite correctly. Thank you very much for giving me the time. I obviously work for Positive Base, and we work with Newham residents who are living with or affected by HIV. What I said in our group was that as much as money works is very good, I think in practical terms, it doesn't really meet the needs of the residents. Why? Because we cannot send everybody there and get the service on the same day. Give you a good example. If somebody comes in and they say, they got an advised service anywhere in the borough and say, my meter's gone off, I don't have any money. So the first thing you think about is going to Money Works. No, actually, we need to have small grants that we can give people. And I think you need to think about how you can decentralize some kind of grant system to the other organizations, to the small community organizations. And as it's been said before again, I think it's really better to co-locate advice with practical support together, because then somebody gets a holistic service. They come in for advice, they get food. If they don't have gas, they also get the gas at the same time. So I think we need to think about that model in different community organizations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Right, finally, I'm going to be bringing in Joe Lyons. Over to you.
Thanks, Roxana. So it's been firstly fascinating in terms of everyone's contributions and views. And I think one thing that strikes me over the kind of the past maybe 9 years in terms of looking at from a voluntary sector perspective, children and young people service, COVID response, and now this crisis, is the collaboration that's needed between all of the voluntary sector to then work with all of the public sector to then bring in the private sector. And I think those three sectors are going to be what's in you and what's going to be able to get us through this crisis working together. And I think taking my West Ham hat off, being a part of One Newham, and I think it's up to about 135 member organisations that are part of that collaborative now. And as a voice of, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of residents that fit into those community organisations and community groups, I think, I can't speak for One Newham at the moment because I wouldn't have the authority, but I think as a collective, we'll be absolutely keen to explore how we can collaborate again with the private and public sector to help this situation.
Thank you so much, Joe. And I'd be really keen to explore sort of that deepening of collaboration with the alliance of voluntary sectors organisations that you're involved in as part of boosting sort of our response. I'm gonna, being conscious of time, just ask if slide 16 can just be shared on screen, and we're going to conclude with what it is that we're currently doing, what we're going to be putting in place, and then what happens next following the conclusion of today's summit. So just wanted to give everyone an overview of what it is that we're already doing and what we're intending to build on. So here you'll see an overview of key things that we've been mobilising around over the past 4 years, and particularly accelerated in response to the COVID-19 situation that we found ourselves in. On the Eat for Free scheme, so this in essence saves households with primary school age kids £500 per child per year through an investment of £6 million from the council, directly from the council. As you can see here, through the Newham Food Alliance, there's some 50 tonnes of food that's been distributed weekly to households in this borough, and that comprises of 30 tonnes of surplus food and some 20 tonnes of food that's sourced from other avenues being distributed. And also the work that we're doing through our Newham service, through our Newham Money, our Newham Works, our work around Employment Rights Hub, around income maximisation, and the whole package around that. And then, mobilising big anchor partners and companies located in Newham to become London living wage employees, because that's what we are, and it's a core feature of our community wealth building agenda and wider inclusive economy strategy that we talked about earlier. If we can move on to the next slide, in terms of what we will be announcing, and the issue will be going out in a short while, probably early afternoon. Today I'm going to be announcing that the council will work with a whole range of partners to deliver borough a network of warm havens across the borough, where libraries, leisure centres, community buildings, NHS buildings, specific places are made available to those in need, alongside community hot mills in partnership with the Newham Food Alliance. And the exact locations and timings will be announced in due course. And then will also be, as part of enabling people to navigate where those spaces are, be producing the resources to make it easy for people to identify and find out. We're also going to be continuing our work with the voluntary community and faith sector around how we can enhance our collective, not just understanding, but our information about what we can be providing to our cohort of residents that we're dealing with, and really amplify our package of offer, or menu of offer, as it were, forgive the pun, to our wider community cohort, because there's something that's going to be very, very important around destigmatising. I was really interested in one of the earlier comments when we were doing the feedback relating to the Wi-Fi access, but as we all know, as has emerged through the breakout sessions, there's a lot more that we can do collectively. So going on to the next slide, what we will be doing, following on from today's conversation, I'll be pulling that together with officer colleagues. We'll be producing an action plan, building on and drawing on what's been discussed today in the breakout sessions. It will be shared with a cost of living task force, which I'll be convening over the next couple of weeks, comprising of representatives from the range of organisations that we have here. I'll also be organising a town hall style event open to all residents in Newham, so that we can be talking directly to the community about what it is that we're putting in place, what is available, and where they can go for help. And then we'll also be similarly doing a business focused event, because as has been expressed in the chat, the inflationary pressures facing organisations, be those businesses in the private sector, in the public sector, in the voluntary sector, we're also all going to be challenged in terms of energy costs and how we maintain those. Stuff around energy conservation in homes, and that wider piece around how we can, in the medium and long term, incubate our borough from what inevitably will be ongoing, enduring shocks to the global economy as a consequence of conflict anywhere in the world, is something that we're going to need to have to also focus on, and we'll come back with thinking around that in due course. And we will, of course, continue our lobbying and our asks of government for a fairer deal for Newham, and we will be working in collaboration with other local authorities in London through London councils, and directly working in collaboration with the Mayor of London. And as pointed out here, we are in support of his lobbying of national government for a freeze in rent, which will go some way in helping and providing some reassurance to our residents. So I wanted to thank everyone for making the time to be here, for staying on for a few minutes longer, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all in the not too distant future as we come back together, check against progress, discuss the action plan that's been pulled together. And I'm not intending for that to be in 3 weeks' time or 4 weeks' time. I'm looking at quite a rapid turnaround. So keep an eye out on an email coming in over the next couple of days with regards to, at the very least, a save the date. And I'll conclude by lastly, but certainly not finally, thank you so much for your individual and organisational efforts and the collaboration and commitment that you have demonstrated and shown to our borough and the people in this borough. I genuinely am deeply grateful, and I can't think of a more awesome bunch of people to be working with during these absolutely crushing and catastrophic times, and I just salute every single one of you for your ongoing and enduring efforts, and for that I will be eternally grateful. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, Peter. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.